At the beginning of the Second World War, but it was never actually used. And we purchased them in derelict condition in about 1980 something, and over about 6 years there was the pair, and the other one's back in the yard, and the pair were restored, and we've been using them ever since. The larger engine at this end is the compound engine built in 1917 at the end of the First World War, where agriculture needed a lot of steam equipment to get agriculture back on its feet again. And as I said, this is a compound where steam is actually used twice. It goes into the high pressure cylinder, and then being used there, it then goes into the low pressure cylinder and is exhausted up the chimney. And as you can see, they've both got cables on which first engine gets pulled the cable out now. The cables will then be joined together and pulled back in and then connected to the cultivator. The advantage of this method of operation is that the land was never, well, when the horses were ploughing, a pan was built up in the soil where horses had trodden sort of over the years. These came in with cable ploughing, so there was not the weight on the land, so that the implement could actually break the pan up, and they would come in with the cultivator and break the pan up in both directions. They would do it one way and then do it again at right angles. And they were actually used more for cultivating than they were for ploughing.
Right, so as Peter said, you can see the little engine is backing up to the big engine, and they will connect the cable, and the little one will chop across the field and draw the cable out. Now, a little bit more background history for you. In 1867, the Agricultural Society investigated the state of steam cultivating, and they visited 311 farms all over the country. And they decided that the use of steam was definitely an economic proposition, so we were on a roll. The average length of the day that they worked was 10 hours, and an engine would burn 2,400 weight of coal a day, which cost 15 shillings a tonne. Now, I haven't converted that into modern money or modern weights, but I'm sure there are those amongst the audience who will be able to do so. And just so that you knew, it cost about £46 a year to keep a horse. But gradually, the use of steam power became common and became an established part of the countryside. The engine is pulling the cable out. Now, the cables could be up to, I think, 800 yards? 1,000 yards on the big engines. So we could have had one engine parked right at the top of the field where that tree is with the hedge, and the other engine would be way back in the distance. In fact, sometimes the engines couldn't be seen by each other, and that's why they had the whistles to communicate with each other to know when it was safe to pull the plough or the cultivator or whatever implement they were using. A little bit about, sorry? Is it going to enlighten you on here?
When the engines were used for mould draining, which was when the mould went down in underneath the soil for drainage purposes, it was a 2-to-1 pull, which meant that the cable went out round the mould and back to the engine. So, of course, the 1,000 yards was then converted to 500, which is mainly why they had such large cable drums on them underneath.
Okay, we'll keep talking about the cable now, because this in itself is a very, very special part of the history. It wouldn't have worked if we hadn't had steel cables. Now, my understanding is that originally, way back in the sugar plantations, they used ropes, but it wasn't successful. It stretched, it broke, it didn't last very long. But meanwhile, in Germany, in the silver mines out there, they were starting to use wrought iron in their cables, and they were twisted and made by hand, which was obviously a very tedious process. But again, another Brit came on the scene, and in London, a chap called Andrew Smith was experimenting with ways to make wire ropes for ships. And in fact, he used a hemp rope walkway, and if any of you have been up to the Chatham Dockyard, you'll know the sort of system that he used. And then they started using the wire ropes on the ships, like the SS Great Britain, and eventually the companies became established. And so there was also a system which I don't understand called the Bessemer process, but that was involved, and as a result of all of that wonderful invention and technology coming together, they managed to devise this wire rope, which, if you actually look at it, is quite a complicated piece of equipment that everybody rather takes for granted. Okay, right, let's go to that piece of paper. Now, the engine is at the top of the field, and in between the two engines we have an implement. This implement is a cultivator. Now, as Peter said, the engines could plough, and they would also cultivate, and they had a range of other implements as well. We weren't allowed to plough the field up, can't think why, perhaps one year. So we brought the cultivator, and we're not actually allowed to put the cultivator into the ground, so we will simply pull it backwards and forwards. But if you are interested in seeing steam ploughing and steam cultivating, come the end of the year, there's a number of ploughing matches in Kent and Sussex and all around, and quite often we'll be there with the engines, so it's worth coming along to have a look. Other implements were, as Peter said, a mould drainer. They were also used with rollers on, and the engines were sometimes used for dredging. And in fact, I think this engine of Peter's did some dredging, did it not, Peter?
This engine did some dredging at East Grinstead, mainly for fishing lakes. And that is an extremely messy job, as you can probably imagine, because the dredge doesn't actually have a floor to it, it's on skids with a back. So you just pull the mud out of the lake where you're dredging, and then the other engine pulls it back and leaves the contents of the dredge just sort of where you are on the bank of the pond or the lake. And of course then you've got trees and all that sort of thing to contend with, and it is an extremely messy job. But it's nice to think that they were used commercially, and there isn't really anything modern that has the equivalent of that amount of cable underneath the machine that is able to do the same work that a ploughing engine can do. And actually, some of them were converted to diesel, so all the motion on top was taken off, and then a diesel engine was put on top, and then of course you could stay in bed quite a bit longer. You just push the button, start the engine, and off you go.
Okay, talking about beds, this is going really well, I'm very impressed. The crew. By the 1860s, it was more favourable to have contractors. As you can appreciate, buying two ploughing engines and all the equipment was an expensive outlay, and so the contractors would go from farm to farm to farm. All the farmer had to do was to provide the coal and the water. The usual cost, well, there we go, that's the whistle. So the top engine has indicated to the bottom engine that he can pull the rope across. I think that's what will be happening next. Yep. So the engine is out of gear. He will engage the drum and pull the rope towards him. And you can see the wire rope is being pulled across the field very, very gently. So as I said, the cost was about 14 shillings an acre to plough and £1 an acre to cultivate it. Right. Lots of clanking and banging going on, but I think he knows what he's doing, that's right. And each set of tackle would have 4 men and a boy, and they all lived in a little wooden hut on wheels, a living van, which travelled with the engines. And they would have a water cart as well, and they towed the gear from farm to farm to farm, so it was jolly hard work for them. Right, I think the cable is coming across very, very gently. And then when the join gets to the cultivator, they will fix it onto the cultivator. Okay. Okay, slight technical hitch. This engine, the engine at the bottom of the field, the big one, actually steamed up here from Hadlow or from Comp yesterday on its own. And I think they've just got to make a slight adjustment before they start pulling it across. So to fill in the time, a few facts and figures for you. Between 1859 and 1928, they estimate that 6,830 cable ploughing engines were manufactured in the United Kingdom. That's a phenomenal industry. And 64% of these engines, that was 4,380 of them, were actually exported. So it was a big industry, and the British engineering had a phenomenal effect on the agriculture all around the world. Engines went as far as Australia. In fact, the little Fowler that I was driving around earlier, that was sent out to Australia. They sent out to South America. A lot went to the continent, to Germany. Fowlers had a base actually in Germany. And so we had a big impact on the world agriculture at the time. So only 2,500 actually worked in this country. I honestly don't know how many of them there are left, but perhaps up to 300, probably not even that many. And Fowlers, the company that I said John Fowler won the prize and whose company made these engines, they were the major player in this field. In fact, 88% of the engines exported in the world were from that company in Leeds. Unfortunately though, they made them too well, and the British farmer, being the sort of person that they are, they kept them working forever. And in fact, and they sort of never got broken, they just kept being repaired or fixed or upgraded. So sales in this country slumped, and just before the First World War, it really started to decline. But as Peter said, during the First World War there was a real concern in the country that we weren't able to feed ourselves, and to encourage the farmers to invest in this modern equipment, the government actually placed a big order with Fowlers and arranged for the farmers to be able to buy them on hire purchase. So there was a big boost to sales in 1917, and the big AA at the bottom of the field here was one of those engines. Two more engines were bought by a local firm. I don't know if there's anybody here from Crocken Hill, but there was a company up there called Thomas Wood, and they placed an order, and they were delivered in 1911. And when they finally paid off the bill in October 1915, they had paid £2,231.01, and that's what the set of engines cost them. I don't know what a set of the equivalent ploughing equipment will be today, but anyway, that's how much they cost in those days. How are we doing with the ploughing? Right, looks like they're now starting to connect the cable to the cultivator.
The cultivator has got a sort of Y on the front, and the cables from each engine are attached to the Y. As the engine will pull, it'll pull it round, and then under normal circumstances the operator on the cultivator would pull the lever and put the tines into work. When it gets to the end of work, the other engine will pull back and pull the Y round, so lifting the tines out of work, and then the implement will then turn round almost in its own length, and as you can see the steers person is now on there, and then as soon as it starts coming back, he will pull the lever again, putting the tines back into work again. And that is all there really is to operating the implement. And it is not an easy job. Dust, of course, was a terrible problem with the operators on the implements. And the drivers and operators were always worried about their eyesight. A gang of contractors that would normally operate these, they would consist of 5 people. It would be the foreman, the 2 engine drivers, the implement operator, and the football. And they would work from dawn till dusk, and never stopped because they were paid acreage money. The more acreage they did, the more money they earned. And the cook boy would get the food, get the head most and that sort of thing, and they did tend tend to live off the land to a great extent, eggs from the farmer where they were, and then the drivers one at a time would come in for their food while the cook boy spelled them, and the foreman would probably go looking for work. They sort of had an area. They'd go out in about March, and then they would come back in about October. And during the winter months, they would service the equipment or do thrashing work. And so it was a hard old life, I can tell you. The engines were probably banked up overnight, so they were almost ready to go in the morning again. And so on they went. They probably wouldn't have worked if the weather conditions were extremely bad, because obviously it wouldn't be very practical. And but that was the way they did it. And as I explained, they were breaking up the pan, and which was extremely important for the drainage and the good conditions of the land itself.
As you can see, the cultivator is now being drawn back and forth. As I said at the beginning, these engines are not a matched pair, and if they were a matched pair, they'd both be facing in the same direction. But because the wire cable comes out on the left-hand side on one engine and on the right-hand side on another, but because they're an odd pair, one's having to go backwards. The little engine at the top of the field, the very old one, she was the 1876 or 77 one? She was built in 1876, and she has a partner who was built in 1877. And my understanding is that they went back to the works, and she was ready, and the other one was ready, so they came out together, and they've been together for well over 100 years. And in fact, they're the oldest pair of ploughing engines that have been together, still working. So it's a real privilege that we have them with us today. So the cultivator's got back to the end, and as you can see, this cultivator turns when it gets to the machine, when it gets to the traction engine. They are able to turn it. If it was a plough, some of you may have seen the ploughs going back and forth, looking a bit like a praying mantis. They go backwards and forwards, but they don't turn around. This was a different technique, using the chains and the wheel at the front to turn the machine. Well, as I said, farmers looked after these engines, and they used them for years and years and years. And gradually the sales in this country declined, not helped by the fact that technology coming in from the war had moved on. The combustion engine, the internal combustion engine was coming on, diesel engines, petrol engines, and steam was beginning to not be a commercially viable operation anymore. As Peter said, in 1977, the government did try and improve the situation, simply because they needed more engines on the land. But after the First World War, the sales of engines declined dramatically. And they've been so well made that they did a report about it in the 1920s. And Alfred Fowler, obviously from the Fowler Company, said, and this is a quote, that there are approximately 540 of our double-engine tackle at work in this country. And of this number, 267 are over 40 years old. Now, I'm not sure how many of our modern combines and other agricultural machinery will be working in 40 years' time, but these old ladies kept going. The last Aveling and Porter ploughing engine was made in 1924. Only 2 Fowler ploughing engines were made in 1927, and then in 1937, after 75 years, they made the last engines at Fowler's in Leeds. So it was a very, very special 100 years, and of course, the Second World War came along. They were still being used, but after the Second World War, the internal combustion engine, the linkage on the tractors and modern technology had just outstripped them, and the ploughing engines were very much laid up. Some of them will continue to be used for dredging, as Peter said, and in fact I think they were working up until not that many years ago. We've had, there's a pair of ploughing engines based at the Tinkers Park site in Hadlow Down that were used for commercially for dredging way up until the 1970s, 1980s. They were used for various other haulage jobs where a wire rope was needed, but basically they were put in the yards, covered in sheets. Some of them were scrapped, a lot of them were scrapped, but some of them, like the engines that you see here today, were rescued and have been restored over many, many years in some cases, with a lot of hard work, teams of people working on these, and now we've got the privilege of being able to bring them to the shows and share them with you. So I think I probably said as much as I need to say. I'm going to pass over.
Okay. I tell you, that is so interesting. The thing that amazes me is how much of the machinery we build today will still be here in 130 years' time. And I think not a lot. When you look at these things, they do look like something out of Mad Max, but the power, the torque that these things have is quite extraordinary. They're throwing that thing around like it's a toy. So I've thoroughly enjoyed that. Well done, Melanie. Absolutely great talk. And Peter as well, with all of his knowledge. Really interesting. They do, that means stop, does it? A blast on the hooter. So does this mean we have a problem, or are they stopping for tea?
I don't think there's a problem. There is a system of signals that the crews develop and establish to know when to go and when to stop. And as you heard just now, there was a long blast from the engine at the top, and that means stop pulling because there's some form of problem in the middle. It may be that it just went a bit wibbly, it may be that something got stuck, but it's just to stop. And Peter might flap his hands about sometimes, or his arms, that'll mean slow down or go faster. But no, it wasn't a problem. They obviously just got, perhaps he got stuck on a bit of grass.
I'm just thinking about the cost of these things to try and make the machine in the middle there, the plow, whatever you call it, cultivator. My goodness me, it would take us, it was like when we stopped using steam trains in this country and then tried to build one. It cost us millions to build one. And it would be the same with these things. I can't imagine how much they would cost now to actually build again. But to see them in such wonderful condition and in such wonderful working condition, I think everybody deserves a huge round of applause from everyone. Come on.
Yay!
Well done, guys. Thank you very much indeed. A lot of discussion going on over there. But a very instructional hour there. I thought it was very, very good. So I think we are now just about to take the cultivator off of the two wires, and then the two engines will have to take their own wires back and then leave the field. So I'll leave you with that thought in mind. Thank you, Melanie, for that. It has been really, really good. Thank you, Peter, as well. And Peter owns or co-owns both of these. So, yeah, it's quite extraordinary.
Okay, shall we get going around
Yep.
the rest of it? Yep,
Yes,
that was
please.
lovely.
Yeah.